Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
On this President's Day, protests against the current president. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and those protests happened across the nation, including here in San Diego. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne joins us live from Vista, where another demonstration is happening now. Tanya.
Maya, this is a second protest we've been to today. We're here in Vista now, where you can see protesters are right behind me, and they're choosing to spend their President's Day protesting the current president, Donald Trump, and all of the orders that have been coming down from his office since he took that office. Protests like this one have been happening all day throughout the county and nationwide. Earlier today, we were in San Diego at the county administration building for a different protest.
My father and my grandfather did not fight, so we would have to watch a Nazi give a Sieg Heil.
Around 500 people were at the county administration building on Monday to protest President Donald Trump and the new administration. Each had their own reason for being there, and they range from immigration, LGBTQ rights, to climate action, and more. The tipping point for Ray Melvet was when his daughter and son-in-law were laid off unexpectedly.
So my daughter and son-in-law both are rangers in Yosemite, or at least they were till 2 days ago, when they received a stock email that came and said they were no longer competent for what the job that they're doing is.
Melvet lives in San Juan Capistrano. He drove to the San Diego protest to support his daughter and the many federal workers being laid off.
800 of our forest rangers, they were the rangers that met all of us when you went to Yosemite. They're the ones that checked you in for backpacking. They're the ones that cleaned the trail and welcome people and help people to understand and to be safe in our national forests.
He admits many of President Trump's actions had not had a direct impact on him until they did.
And then all of a sudden, it hit home. It hit my home, my family, my own daughter who planned on living there forever. And it's going to happen to everybody. Tomorrow it'll be someone else. It'll be their sexual orientation or whether they voted for the president or not. They'll be targeted.
There have been protests throughout the county and nationwide since President Trump took office.
50 states, 50 protests, one movement, and it began just a couple weeks ago on February 5th when people decided that, we weren't going to sit idly by. We had to get out to the streets. We had to really start getting this revolution rolling again.
Frances Yasmin Motiwala is a grassroots political organizer and board member for Activist San Diego, a social justice nonprofit.
Instead of just yelling, we're here to start organizing. And what that means is both listening to speakers from organizations that actually have a clear idea and have been organizing for a long time, sharing their wisdom of how exactly people can get involved at this critical moment.
Motiwala says this movement won't be dying anytime soon.
It's not just protests, but advocacy, lobby visits, press conferences, boycotts. We are here to combine all of these strategies.
We the people do not fear. We stand up for justice here.
The groups are organizing a nationwide blackout on February 28th, where supporters are asking the public to refrain from any shopping.
No purchases, no gas, no groceries, no online purchases. February 28th, hit them when it hurts, and let's make some noise.
Maya, and we'll be keeping up with the protests that have no end in sight, as well as nationwide movements that could come to the San Diego area. Now, protesters here in Vista are expected to be here until about 7 o'clock tonight. Live in Vista, Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
President Trump's approach to immigration is one of the issues inspiring today's protest. Next week, a local state senator will try to get California to be more cooperative with the administration. Republican Brian Jones represents several East County communities. He's also a high-ranking member of the state Senate as Senate Minority Leader. Jones says he will announce a proposed overhaul of California's sanctuary state law. More details will be announced Friday in San Diego. In a statement from Jones, he says the plan would make sure violent offenders are not shielded from federal immigration authorities. One of the federal agencies upended by sweeping job cuts is the Federal Aviation Administration. Many of those fired in recent days are probationary workers who are in the first year of their jobs. Julia Benbrook is in Washington with more on the impact to the FAA and what it means for airline safety.
In recent days, officials have set their sights on probationary workers, those who have typically been employed for less than a year. And our team is learning that several hundred workers at the Federal Aviation Administration started getting firing notices on Friday and could even be barred from entering FAA facilities Tuesday after the federal holiday. Their union, Professional Aviation Safety Specialist, or PASS, represents more than 11,000 FAA and Department of Defense workers who install, maintain, and support equipment for the FAA. The union president said in a statement, quote, "Staffing decisions should be based on an individual agency's mission-critical need. To do otherwise is dangerous when it comes to public safety and is especially unconscionable in the aftermath of 3 deadly aircraft accidents in the past month." The move comes less than 3 weeks since the mid-air collision over Washington, D.C. killed 67 people and highlighted FAA infrastructure issues. The firings did not include air traffic controllers who are in short supply amid a decades-long staffing shortage. This decision is a part of the administration's broader effort to shrink the size of the federal government. Earlier this month, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said that he had spoken with the Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk, adding, quote, "They are going to plug in to help upgrade our aviation system." Reporting at the White House, I'm Julia Benbrook.
The U.S. Navy was back at work in San Diego Bay to retrieve wreckage from its jet that crashed last week. Some debris has been found about a half-mile from the crash site. 2 pilots ejected safely last Wednesday while trying to land at Naval Air Station North Island. The military is asking the public to avoid the Shelter Island Basin as it continues its investigation. President Trump's 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports are expected to take effect next month. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Wynn says the tariffs could crush the already struggling local brewing industry.
This is potentially a nail in the coffin for a number of little craft breweries.
Chris Kramer is the co-owner of Karl Strauss Brewing Company. It's one of the oldest craft breweries in San Diego. He says the tariffs come at an unwelcome time for the industry.
Last year, more craft breweries went out of business in San Diego than ever before.
Since the pandemic, breweries have relied more on cans for sales since customers have been slow to return to tap rooms. But rising costs and changing drinking attitudes have sapped this lifeline. Increasingly, more Americans are choosing hard seltzers over beer, and the price of aluminum has risen since the 2018 tariffs and the global supply shortage. And craft breweries already have a small profit margin.
So the margins have shrunk significantly, and now what you're facing is that this one thing that craft brewers uniquely do, which is we put beer into cans.
The tariffs would hit all aspects of the industry, from the steel used to brew the beers, to the kegs used to store them, to the cans to sell them. Cans account for 75% of a brewery's revenue, and a lot of it comes from Canada.
It's reliable, it's good aluminum, and the price is right. And so, I think craft brewers, like other businesses, they try and find the best product at the best price so that they can deliver for their customers. Ultimately, these tariffs are all paid by customers.
Customers like Deepak Devastali say they are willing to pay a little more to support local businesses.
Certainly, you have to think about what makes the most sense, but we understand the importance of local businesses to the lifeblood of an economy, so at the end of the day, we would still support it.
But Kramer says there's only so much customers would be willing to pay, leaving breweries to absorb the rest, and smaller breweries won't be able to shoulder it. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
A big ally of President Donald Trump in Southern California says he is seeking higher office.
Our campaign to be the next governor of California. I am running for governor of our beautiful state, which I absolutely love.
Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco kicked off his campaign today in Riverside. He says his priorities will be public safety and the cost of living. California will elect a new governor next year due to term limits for Gavin Newsom. Bianco will have to win over moderate voters to be competitive. While President Trump won Riverside County by 1% last November, he lost the state by 20 points. President Donald Trump's executive order freezing billions in aid to countries around the world has had impacts just across the U.S.-Mexico border. iNews Source reporter Sofia Mejias Pasco has the story.
Claudio Portela directs 2 migrant shelters and a soup kitchen with Proyecto Salesiano in Tijuana. After Trump halted foreign aid distributions, Portela said more than half of their services are affected. But they have to stay open, she said. People in need keep coming.
Y nosotros tenemos que funcionar. La gente va a seguir viniendo. Los albergados siguen estando aquí. Hay que atenderlos. Entonces, es muy difícil.
The 90-day freeze calls for the review of foreign aid programs to ensure alignment with Trump's America First agenda. The U.S. government spends a small fraction of its budget on international aid, but Trump has targeted the spending and questioned its value to taxpayers. Portela said she hopes the funding will return after 3 months, but it isn't guaranteed.
Confiamos que regresarán, pero en este momento no podemos atenernos a eso porque realmente no sabemos, ¿no?
Last week, a community health clinic for migrants and local residents closed. A playtime program for migrant kids ended. Portela said both were due to the American aid freeze. For KPBS, I'm iNews Source reporter Sofia Mejias Pasco.
iNews Source is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS.
Low clouds are back in the forecast for us tonight, and we will even have some of the fog for our coastal communities going down to the mid-50s. Not overly cold, but we have a cooler pattern that's worked its way in, and I'll talk about how those high temperatures through the afternoon will be changing this week coming up.
Mexico's president says she's willing to take Google to court over the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum spoke to the media today in Mexico City. She says she's waiting to hear back from Google. Last month, the company changed the name of the body of water to Gulf of America following President Donald Trump's executive order. The name Gulf of Mexico goes back to 1607. 49% of it is controlled by Mexico, 46% by the United States, and 5% by Cuba.
What they are telling us is that President Trump's decree changed the name from the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. But this is incorrect, as I have said many times. President Trump's decree only changed the name within his own continental shelf, which extends 22 nautical miles from the U.S. coast, not the entire Gulf.
Relations between Mexico and the United States have taken on new strain since Trump was inaugurated. President Sheinbaum says Mexico will hold high-level talks on trade and security between the two countries later this week. California has ambitious goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the cars that we drive. Are electric vehicles the answer? KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge asks whether California really has the power infrastructure to run all of the cars on our roads.
This parking garage is home to one of the car charging stations at UC San Diego, which is one of the largest public charging hubs in the world. UCSD student Isaiah Kabibi charges his electric hybrid car on campus.
It's interesting to see how many people actually drive electric cars here. It's quite a lot of students, so having these outlets, especially with a lot of kids that I know that live in condos where they are not able to charge at home, having these here are really, really helpful.
And so this charger here from PowerFlex, you have an app.
David Victor is co-director of UCSD's Energy Decarbonization Initiative.
And you turn on the app, and then you look at the code here, and then it tells you what the cost is going to be, and then it checks to make sure you have money in your bank account.
Electric cars are a way to slow global warming and also to meet California's clean energy mandates. 10 years from now, new car dealers in the state will be able to sell only zero-emission cars.
And if the state's policy goals are met such that by 2035, all new cars are effectively electric vehicles, then we're going to see a lot more electric vehicles on the road, much bigger need for the infrastructure to charge those vehicles, not just at home, but also in workplaces and on the roads.
Meeting California's clean energy goals means transforming the way we get around. The EPA says transportation is the nation's biggest contributor to carbon emissions. Within transportation, light-duty vehicles, cars and pickup trucks, emit 57% of all the greenhouse gases. Cars don't have to be electric to be zero emission, but a lot of people think EVs just make the most sense. Jay Kim is chair of the Industrial and Systems Engineering Department at the University of San Diego.
We already have an electric grid. We already have the infrastructure. Whereas if you were to do, for example, hydrogen vehicles, you would have to start from scratch, basically, and try to build up that whole infrastructure.
So what will a fleet of mostly electric cars do to California's power grid? Well, the California Energy Commission forecasts that in 2035, EVs will represent 20% of the total energy demand that California utilities must provide for. In San Diego, power demand and grid congestion are lowest overnight, and that's why it's cheapest to charge your car overnight. The problem is most overnight power comes from carbon-emitting natural gas plants because renewable sources don't produce power when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Victor says that's why workplace charging is the best option, because daylight hours are when carbon-free solar power in California is abundant.
What we're doing here at UC San Diego is asking the question, suppose that in addition to congestion, we also care about the emissions that are caused by our vehicles. And if you add the cost of those emissions, it already makes sense quite often to be charging in the middle of the day rather than at night. The tariffs just don't reflect that yet.
EV owners who own their own homes are most likely to have a home charger. But students at UCSD are looking for other places to fill their cars with electrons. Apartment dweller Stella Riley, who got a Volkswagen ID4 about a month ago, almost always charges on campus while she attends classes. She says as a new EV driver, her charging habits remain a work in progress.
Depends on my mood. If I feel like charging it, I will. Normally I wait till it gets a little bit lower, because if I'm at like 60%, I probably won't charge it. But once it gets to like 40, I'm kind of like, I should charge my car.
David Victor says UCSD plans to triple its number of electric car chargers. But as infrastructure needs expand for EVs, there are some possible trends in car ownership that could make them less of a power burden than we might think. Jay Kim says a lot of people predict the future will bring less individual car ownership and more people who rent time from a public fleet of autonomous self-driving cars.
You can spread out the charging a lot easier, and you can match basically the supply and demand for mobility easier. As a result, you could also then match the supply and demand of electricity easier as well.
But for now, individual EV owners are going to have to figure out the best place and time to charge, and some people hope that will be during the day. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Tom's story is an example of the feature reporting done by the KPBS newsroom. You can find all of our stories on the KPBS YouTube page. Subscribe and get notified when new content is posted. It's also where we live stream. KPBS Evening Edition, weeknights at 5. Last month's devastating wildfires in Los Angeles destroyed thousands of homes and businesses. The mental toll it's taken on people is hard to imagine. But 2 San Diegans are doing what they can to help people heal. KPBS reporter John Carroll says they're doing it with the help of some feline friends.
The idea is simple. Spending time with cats can be calming, healing for people dealing with such overwhelming loss.
Come on in, pet a cat, take a load off for a few minutes, just relax. You've got a lot going on in your life, and if we can help you de-stress a little bit, we're happy to do that.
That's something anybody can do at the Cat Cafe and the Gas Lamp Quarter, but Tony Wang is making it easier for wildfire victims.
For people who are in the areas that were affected by the fires, on weekdays, for walk-in admissions, we're taking half off.
Wang says just show an ID that says you're from one of the affected areas, and that's it. We all saw the scenes of devastation, but there was one particular moment that got Wang's attention.
The thing that struck us, that got my attention, was somebody lost their entire home burnt down, and they thought they lost their cat.
But the cat was not lost. Weeks later, it's still difficult for Wang to talk about.
But seeing that guy who was surrounded by a burned down house, hugging his animal, just like the unbridled joy that he felt, that's kind of what made me think, hopefully we can kind of bring some of that joy to folks like that.
Tony Wang has company when it comes to offering comfort to wildfire victims at a place a little north of here. It's here at the Cat Lounge Rescue and Adoption Center in La Jolla, where owner Renee Shamlou actually started the whole process with a donation drive.
So people were dropping off dog supplies, animal supplies, blankets, all the things. It took up almost the entire foyer. It was incredible to see the community come together the way they did.
After driving all of the donations up to L.A., where Renee Shamlou has family, she thought about how to help once things had settled down.
And then Tony reached out to us and said, can we partner together in offering like the half-off admission to people? And I was like, that's a great idea.
In addition to the Cat Cafe downtown and the Cat Lounge Rescue and Adoption Center in La Jolla, Wang is offering the same half-off deal at Cat and Craft in Vista. A gesture from two San Diegans to our friends and family up north. A few moments of feline friendship. A balm to the soul of people who need a little reprieve in such a difficult time. John Carroll, KPBS News.
So cute. Well, San Diego is expecting some sunny skies and warmer weather this week. Details are coming up in our forecast. The same cannot be said for much of the country dealing with extreme conditions. Michael Yoshida has more on the cold weather alerts affecting several states.
When temperatures get that cold, lives are at risk.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott warning a month after storms dump snow across the southern United States, Texans should prepare for another round of extreme winter weather, including frigid temperatures, which could be life-threatening in some parts of the country.
If people are not paying attention to it, they're going to be shocked by what's going to happen over the next few hours and the next few days. And actually, in some places in the state of Texas, it may be the coldest event ever marked in history.
From Texas to Montana, more than 30 million people under cold alerts. Snowfall also expected. 4 to 10 inches could be dumped in Kansas, Missouri, and Illinois, and 3 to 6 in Kentucky, still reeling from a weekend of deadly flooding.
It's impacted all of Kentucky. All of Kentucky still has standing water in different areas.
A state of emergency declared, with record rainfall leading the Kentucky State Police to perform more than 1,000 rescues in less than 24 hours. First responders warning people of the dangers of water-covered roadways.
It does not matter how deep it is, don't try to cross it. Small cars, it'll sweep you right off the roadway.
Tennessee and Virginia filled with similar sites of high water. Officials warning as flood concerns continue, the next threat is on the horizon.
This is a dangerous situation. Power could be out for some considerable amount of time. There's cold weather coming.
In Washington, Michael Yoshida, KPBS News.
Of course, we've seen a lot of changes over the past week, from the wet weather as we went last week to a much quieter weekend and start to the work week. We've seen the onshore flow kick back in, which means the marine layer brings back that chance for coastal fog, especially as we head into tomorrow morning. That's going to be our greatest threat for coastal fog. Tuesday, tomorrow, will also be our coolest day for most locations as we head throughout the work week. And then, yes, we do have the onshore flow continuing for a lot of this week, which means at least we won't be drying out too quickly behind the rainfall that we've had. San Diego, our low 54 as we head through tonight. Oceanside coming down to 50 degrees. Mount Laguna holding on to 38, and Chula Vista back to 52. Again, fog likely for our coastal communities, maybe even some of our inland communities. But the dry, comfortable pattern continues as all the stormy weather kind of goes from the northwest in the U.S. right into the central U.S. So we miss out on the action, which is kind of nice to have that break. We will see a few extra clouds out there, certainly for the morning hours as we head throughout the day. 65 for the high. El Cajon coming in at 70 degrees, while Borrego Springs tops out at 77. It is a cooler day by many standards here for Tuesday. As we get into Wednesday, still keeping that cool onshore flow, but not quite as much in the way of fog and moisture out there. And we will brighten up heading into the late week, where we go up back to the 70s for our coastal communities. Inland communities holding on to the upper 70s for the late week heading into the weekend, so a mild trend there. But we do start off tomorrow with highs only in the upper 60s and a mostly cloudy setup, especially to start off your day. Mountain communities making it into the 40s. You can tell, though, we do venture closer to the upper 50s as we get into Saturday, maybe even making a run at 60 degrees. So there's that mild trend coming in for the weekend as that offshore flow dies down for us heading into the weekend and quiets things out for us and dries things out for us too. We're going to keep things dry heading into the upcoming days for the deserts as we push our way into the 80s yet again. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constancer.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, the impact of mass firings on the functions of the government and the thousands of federal workers let go. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. NPR's Morning Edition talks to the Center for Taxpayer Rights about the risks of granting Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency access to sensitive IRS data. And KPBS Midday Edition is talking with a psychologist about how to cope with the Trump administration's policy changes causing anxiety and fear in many communities. And as usual, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. I wish you a great evening. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.